And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, half of your co-host production, alongside the long snapper formerly known from Rhode Island, Joe DeLeone. Joe, good morning, sir. How are we doing?
I'm doing great. I tried to make the rounds yesterday on St. Patrick's Day to celebrate my holiday. By the way, I'm still pissed at you. I texted you this. I was having a great St. Patrick's Day. It is my my heritage's holiday, being a very blatant Irishman.
Hold on. You can't claim to be Irish and then also be Italian. That's not how this works.
How can I? I'm 50-50. I look Irish and I have an Italian last name. My mother's side is Irish and my father's side is Italian. I wish I looked more Italian because Italians are more better looking than Irishmen.
Thank you. We are. Thank you very much.
There's better complexion. I wouldn't be getting as sunburnt as I do. But you ruined the holiday for me.
What's sunburned?
You don't get sunburned?
Yeah, dude.
Exactly.
I'm trying to make you feel bad.
Exactly. But you ruined my holiday for me, man. I was having a great day, and then you unleash LSU fans at me just because I made an offhanded comment that we've got a picture of Jayden Daniels and 2 first-round picks that are about to go in the top 10. Jayden Daniels has a whole nother season to play. I'm not going to anoint him a first-round pick.
So you went off and started this, so now I will defend this house. You didn't have to make the comment.
I'm not going to anoint a guy a first-round pick until he's proven himself.
But whoever said he was a first-round pick? Because it's interesting. It's very interesting. Okay. I posted a picture. I said LSU quarterback Jayden Daniels alongside Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. And you know who the first comment was? You. And you know what he said? This is what you said. And I quote, 2 first-round picks and then Jayden Daniels. Nobody provoked you whatsoever to start shitting on LSU the way that you did.
Like, quite literally, Jayden Daniels isn't in the 2023 NFL draft. Now, if he was with Drake May and Caleb Williams, I think that would have been more of a leading comment than it was. You know, if I was trying to do if they were in the 2024 class, what? You don't agree with that?
Not say that again so I can understand exactly what you're trying to say here.
My point is that he was in a picture with 2 guys that we know for a fact that are about to be top 5 picks, top 10 picks if one of them happens to fall. If he was in a picture with the 2 2024 quarterbacks and I was trying to make an assumption and be like, oh, he's not on the same planet of these guys that aren't in the current quarterback class for next year, I could get if you're trying to make the argument. I'm trying to dunk on him.
Yourself. Nobody said anything to you. Okay. Bryce Young and Jayden Daniels are really good friends. Nobody said anything to you. And then your Irish ass has to come up in there and start talking stuff. So you know what we're going to do today? Yeah. We're going to debate Jayden Daniels, because what's interesting, Joe, is through the show, everybody's blamed me for this being an LSU podcast. Name the times we've talked about LSU.
We never do.
Okay. So we will talk about Jayden Daniels today because it went pretty viral yesterday that he was working out with Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. I'll give just a very quick tidbit of what's going on there and why they're all there together. But shout out to my good buddy Booger McFarland. We talked yesterday after he retweeted it.
Nice.
So thank you, Booger, for doing that. But that's not all that we're talking about here this morning, Joe.
Yep.
As well. I mentioned this to you. Now, we couldn't get to it last time. The Pac-12 Big-12 merger. I do have a little bit more tiddly-biddly-diddly-dee of this merger.
Oh, we're getting a breaking news sounder being dropped.
You mean like that?
Yeah. Is that coming on later in the show?
I do have something. Okay. So I will admit, humble brag, your boys 4-4 when it comes to these conference realignment talks and what's going to be in the news. I mean, I'm wrong. Name one time I was wrong.
Honestly, you're right. And I think that this show needs more credit for, as much as we say off air that the realignment stuff, it does get a little tiring to talk about because it's a lot of like small steps towards it actually occurring. But man, we keep dropping these tidbits on this show and not enough people are coming back.
Then it comes out. I think Pete Thamel's just watching the show. Pete, if you want to come on, you can. I think our number 2 and number 3 topics are going to merge. Okay. So the third topic was the Pac-12 TV deal. I'll tell you what I'm hearing ESPN's trying to do here. Okay. In reference to this merger, I think it's smart. The only smart thing I think that ESPN's doing, and I think that they're also under the notion and preface of, I don't think that we're going to 2 big super conferences, at least in the next 10 years. I think that they're trying to save that. We'll talk about that here as well. Joe, we broke some news. Actually,
I broke some news.
Okay. All right.
I broke some news.
Okay. If you want to put that on yourself.
No, I broke some news. It got really good traction. So now I'm going to take credit for it.
Hold on. So because it got good traction, now you want to take care of it.
Oh yeah.
Who told you about it?
Oh, I don't know. Somebody happened to drop that in my text messages, and it just happened to end up on our account.
Nevertheless, Tony Mitchell, former, I guess you wouldn't say top 100 recruit. Let's just round. I don't want to fight over semantics, but a top 50 or top 100 recruit was committed to Alabama, was an early enrollee, was arrested in Florida. Now, Joe, the last show that we had, you talked about it being a problem and Kirby Smart probably having a problem. I defended that he didn't. Okay. I'm also going to defend Nick, but I think that there's a major thing that shows that Nick does not have control, and it's showing up on the field. Meaning, when Georgia has all of this going on, their penalties don't go up. It's not affecting them on the field. Alabama was one of the worst teams, actually the second worst team in the country when it comes to penalties. I think that is a direct correlation, what you do off the field, translating to on the field. We'll talk about Tony Mitchell as well. So a big show in store for you here this morning. And then we got Mailbag. So
we got a lot more. First of all, thank you to everyone who dropped us some questions. I think Colin sent us a lot. Colin is a longtime fan of my content, and now he's made his way over here. Colin's a very great listener. Sent us a bunch of questions. We also had a bunch others. I think we had at least 4 or 5 different people on Twitter send us questions. When we pull for questions, the idea is every Saturday we want to do mailbag at the end of the show. So please get us them ahead of time, because if they're dropped in the chat, we would love you to send questions throughout the show in the chat that we'll get to. But we're going to answer the ones on Twitter first before we get to the ones in the chat. So if you want your question answered, comment on Twitter when we pull for them.
And I agree with that. And thank you to Colin. And we will round this intro out by saying I was not wearing LSU gear this morning.
It's green. It's St. Patrick's Day. I'm celebrating St. Patrick's Day. This is not like me trying to cause problems. St. Patrick's
Day was yesterday.
It's the whole weekend. All
right. Okay, Conor McGregor. Okay. But I do love St. Patrick's Day. Did you know in New Orleans, they always have the Italian and Irish festival in New Orleans, and it is massive, because what people forget to realize, okay, and what people like at Notre Dame, as an example, when they talked about Brian Kelly being a bad fit, there's a lot of Irish down here, buddy.
I bet.
Okay, so just so we're understood, like, how many McCormicks can you have in one state? Well, I'm going to let you know we have more people with the last name McCormick inside the state of Louisiana than all of Ireland, okay? But nevertheless, it's going to be fun. We are wearing green from St. Patty's Day. Joe, look at my cup.
What are you drinking? What is that?
It's water, but this is speaking of this is a St. Patty's Day cup where when you put liquid in it, the cup turns green.
I thought you put food dye in your water just for the
crop. I'm not that big of an idiot. I look like it sometimes, but I'm not that big of an idiot. All right, let's get to just a couple quick comments, and then we'll get rolling. Jason Brumfield, Joe's biggest fan, says, get Verge on the phone, put Notre Dame on the schedule. Let's see what you think. Okay.
I'm actually it would take a while it would take probably 5 years for this to actually get put on a schedule. I was about to say
that, but you know what's so weird? Remember when Coastal Carolina and Liberty scheduled a game within 2 days during COVID?
Well, that was during COVID because there was a gap in the scheduling.
Don't give me excuses that you can't do it.
You could hypothetically do it, but it's a matter of having an open week and having the timing available. You know, like that you would need to.
Joe, you don't have to schedule things 7 years in advance.
But they do because they want to be able to promote and have a broadcasting partner and all of that.
You have a permanent broadcasting partner now. So I don't.
Not if it's at LSU, though.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. The home team dictates what broadcast it goes to. So if LSU, so like for example, okay, it was on ABC, but let me just give a example. When LSU went to UCLA, it wasn't on ESPN. Okay, it was on Fox. Okay, yes. Well, whatever home team you play. So if LSU went to South Bend, it would be on NBC. And unless they work something out, you know how the TV channels do, like ESPN and CBS work out all the time to flip-flop games. Nevertheless, I mean,
they should schedule that game. I think that'd be a fun one. I still have.
I would love to go. Look, as much as people think I hate Notre Dame, I would love to go to South Bend.
Have you ever been?
No, I haven't.
It's a great campus. I feel like you would probably.
Do y'all have a Whataburger?
No, there's no.
I heard y'all had like four street lights.
Stop.
I'm serious. That's what I heard.
There's obviously more street lights than that in South Bend. It's a great little area, though. I really like those areas where it's kind of encapsulated a single environment, and that's why I love Notre Dame so much. It's just, if you're there in the fall, it's great weather. It's just a great place to be for college football. I don't know if it lives up to the expectations of some of these SEC schools because it's a different vibe because it's the Midwest. But I think without a doubt, it's top 3 in terms of Midwest football environments.
When I think of the Midwest, I think of unseasoned food.
I mean, I can understand that, and you're not wrong. There are some restaurants there that are not great, but there are some good bar locations there. You're not going to get Italian food there, I can tell you that much, or anything outside of just bar food.
Sad. That's so sad. Joe, I need to fly you to Louisiana. We need to have a crawfish.
Well, that was one of the questions we got from Colin is, am I going to make the trip to Louisiana for an LSU game? And I don't see why not. I would make the trip. I would go. We should pick a game and we should do a show. And we should coordinate that because I'm down to come to Louisiana, Blake.
All right, sounds good. Nikki Hughes, whose son is now an LSU football player. Just was in this past recruiting class. What's the big what school? I forget every time she comments. And Nikki, I'm sorry. Bishop Gorman. Her son played at Bishop Gorman.
Las Vegas.
Yeah, Las Vegas. So it could be a home game for her when USC, because that was announced. Speaking of LSU, USC and LSU are going to be playing in Allegiant Stadium in 2024 to kick off the college football season. Don't say the SEC doesn't play people, but she says, "Good morning to Blake and Joe. I love that hat, Blake." Yeah, this is a camo hat. They did this thing last weekend. The salute to the veterans, and LSU starting pitcher on Friday was at Air Force. So really fun. All right, I'm going to try to get to a couple of these. Jason says Bishop Gorman. Let's see. She says South Bend is a nice town. How about that?
I think a lot of people who visit it, no one's ever going to say anything negative, I feel like, for people who visit it. It's unique. It's different. It's not the same. It's not even going to compare to the SEC vibe. It's different, but it's still just a great place to be. Everyone crapped on me when I tweeted about that when I was there last year during the football season, but if you've been, you know.
The one thing I will say, the last thing I'll end, the Midwest had a very tough go of it yesterday, specifically the great state of Indiana.
That's Jersey, baby. FDU.
Oh, that is Jersey, isn't it?
Yes, dude. That, by the way, that school stinks. That is one of the worst.
Well, they don't.
It's a commuter school. Somebody tweeted out wild scene at FDU, and it was a completely empty parking lot on the campus because nobody actually goes to that school. It's a commuter
school. Know what's wild? Like UMBC when they beat Virginia,
it's also a commuter school.
But their intake of students doubled after the year that they beat Virginia. How wild is that? Don't tell me sports don't
brand recognition.
No doubt. I'm going to tell you, throughout the NCAA tournament, the basketball tournament, I'm an FDU Stan account. Okay.
Good.
I love when somebody comes out of nowhere And especially when, like in the regular season, when they got beat by Toothpaste State, okay, Colgate. All right, I love it. You're coming out of nowhere. All right, but we're going to talk football here today. So everybody do us a favor by hitting the like and share. So many of you listening to us live on Facebook. Stop, collaborate, and listen. Share to all of those LSU groups because Joe's about to get absolutely roasted. Share to all of those SEC groups, college football groups. Share to your own social media pages. Joe closing in on 500 subscribers on YouTube.
5 away.
We're still doing the giveaway, so do us a favor there by hitting the subscribe button and notification bell. Georgia Tech fans were in our mentions this week. Very rough, very rough. But I will say this to every Georgia Tech fan. Don't tell me about what you should and shouldn't do in college football when you win 21 games in the last 5 seasons. That's my rip on them for the day. But like, subscribe, notification bell, everywhere you listen to podcasts, rate, review, and subscribe as well. Let's take our first break. Let's talk about our good friends over at BetOnline. Joe, we're back in 50 seconds. You got some splaining to do next. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events, with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. We're back. Texas and charity stripe, no, you're not. All right, that felt good. That felt really good to say after yesterday's encounter.
Oh yeah.
All right. So, Joe, yesterday, let me set the scene here. Yesterday, I got texted a photo, okay, of LSU quarterback Jayden Daniels working out and hanging out with his really good friend Bryce Young, okay, and SoCal quarterback CJ Stroud.
Are they in California right now? Or
yes, they're with the 3D QB. A lot of guys go there, like Bryce goes there every offseason. And now I need to get this confirmed, okay? If I'm not mistaken, 3D QB runs Alabama's like 7-on-7, like Little League camp, okay?
Oh.
I need to get that confirmed. So, I mean, they're really well known. They've worked with a lot of great quarterbacks. I'm trying to think. Will Levis has been there with them as well. Like, there's been a lot of quarterbacks that train for the combine with them as well. I think last year, if I'm not mistaken, I know that Lamar Jackson worked out with them for a little while, like before the MVP season. They've just had a lot of really good quarterbacks that have come in and out of those doors. Right. But yesterday I posted it. And like I said at the beginning of the show, you said, 2 first-round picks and then Jayden Daniels. And then you went on to say that if Jayden Daniels goes on to be a first-round pick, I will eat a hat. Well, I'm just going to let you know, you better pray to God that he's not, because I'm going to live this up. But let's talk about this, okay? I will give you the floor and how you want to lead this topic, okay? But why so much hate on Jayden Daniels?
It's not hate on Jayden Daniels, Blake. This is the common misconception when we talk NFL draft and we talk projection. I think Jayden Daniels is a fantastic college quarterback, and I've said a million times on the show, he is the perfect quarterback for what Brian Kelly has been looking for, and he finally has it. All of the years that I watched as a Notre Dame fan, guys, bums like Malik. Actually, not bums. Sorry, that's a little extreme. Guys, you couldn't be successful. Brandon Wimbush, Malik Zaire, those guys were what Brian Kelly was looking for, but could not succeed at a high level. I think Jayden Daniels has been fantastic in this past year, but we need to be realistic on his outlook and his pro projection. Just because I'm saying he's not a first-round pick does not mean I don't think he can have an NFL career. It does not mean that I think he can't get drafted somewhere on day 2. I think realistically, if he improves upon some of the issues that he had in this past season at LSU, he has some refinement.
Name
very well.
Name his issues.
I in terms of his issues, I think that he is. I'm trying to think the better way to phrase this. He plays in an offense that allows him to play with his legs. And what I was about to say is I think he compares very favorably to Jalen Hurts as a guy transitioning to the NFL. There's a lot of similarities.
Been a first-round pick
at the time. No, I think that he played. They both played.
That's not what I asked you.
They both played in offenses that set them up because it allowed them to run, and on top of that, it set up easy completions.
So Bryce Young set up an offense to let him throw and pass. That's
not what I'm saying. I'm just You always cut me off when I'm trying to put together my argument.
I know. I'm sorry.
It's hard to continue what I'm saying when you're derailing me like this. Blake, what I'm trying to say is that they both, at Oklahoma and at Alabama, they very heavily relied on their legs, which makes them difficult to defend. And then a lot of their passing concepts are short to intermediate passing concepts, and there's a lot of wide open receivers in the offenses that they played in. There weren't a lot of difficult, hard throws that had to be made compared to some of the top prospects that we have in this year's class. Him going somewhere in the second or third round, I think, is very realistic for what could happen with Jayden Daniels. Again, I'm not saying I'm not high on him, but he's not a first-round pick. And I remember at one point, after his freshman season, he was considered to be a draft prospect. I don't think the decision-making is all there. I just don't. When things aren't easy and set up and laid out for him, I don't see somebody who can read and develop his decision-making when those things don't open up. He has, based on the fact that he led LSU in rushing, I think you can attest, relies very heavily when things don't open up on his legs, which isn't a bad thing, and which is why he works in Brian Kelly's system, is that he's willing to use his legs. But from an NFL standpoint, that stuff doesn't lead to success.
So interesting hearing you say that. Who are going to be the first three quarterbacks drafted? And don't give me the two that he was in the picture with. Who's going to be the third quarterback drafted in this class?
Anthony Richardson.
Okay. Glad that you brought that up and that you answered it correctly. How can you say that he has bad decision-making when he's a 70% completion percentage rate guy? And then I'm looking at these stats from a season ago, and you're going to give me the traits argument. You're going to give me the traits.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But you know what the best decision-making number is always going to be? Completion percentage. Anthony Richardson's a 53% career passer. Okay. 53%. Last year, Anthony Richardson had threw for 2,500 yards, 17 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. When Jayden Daniels literally did 69% completion percentage, 2,900 passing yards, 17 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Here's the biggest thing, though, okay? Because you can't take away his legs like you want to. He had more rushing yards. He had more rushing touchdowns. And Florida had more of a rushing win rate per Football Focus confirmed than what LSU's offensive line had a season ago. So what
how many games is Jayden Daniels down?
You talk about getting derailed.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Getting derailed. Go ahead, though. Go ahead. I'm okay.
How many games did Jayden Daniels start before this upcoming season?
I'm sorry. What's that?
How many games did Jayden Daniels start before he started at LSU?
How many did Bryce Young before he won a Heisman?
We're not talking about Bryce Young.
But my point is that you can't use that same argument for Anthony Richardson when you have other quarterbacks that have literally gone through the same thing. But just because one guy has a long career and one guy can't even complete 55% career completion percentage, when, by the way, statistics showing win rate for Pro Football Focus confirms that your offensive line has the best offensive line win rate. Okay. So when I look at this and you say Jayden Daniels can't win without using his legs, okay, well, my problem with that is now you're putting Jayden Daniels on the meaning that he's a part of winning, okay? Then what's your excuse for Anthony Richardson? I was told that winning is not a quarterback metric. And if it is, Jayden Daniels absolutely blows Anthony Richardson out of the water. Joe, how many times have we seen first-round picks at quarterback elevate a college team to where they at minimum wear 8 games? You want me to tell you majority of them? Outside of Ben Roethlisberger and Josh Allen, the only two that did not have winning teams, which, by the way, they were really bad group of 5 teams, the teams that are in Power 5 programs historically win on average 8.6. Let me look at this stat. Hold on.
Okay.
8.67 wins per game. That's the average. Okay. So you will slobber all over Anthony Richardson for traits, but then when you turn on the film, you know what's interesting, Joe? You sent me the video of Anthony Richardson throwing a 51-yard pass for a touchdown against LSU.
Yeah.
What's interesting about that, you do know that he missed his next 8 passes. He went 15 of 25 for 185 yards and a touchdown. He had an 80-yard run. An 80-yard run. Okay.
Yes.
Outside of the 80-yard run, he only had 20 yards and 8 rushing attempts. Now, here's the thing on Jayden Daniels. That is the biggest misconception out of everything. He couldn't use his legs against Georgia. He was hurt. He had to sit in the pocket. Joe, he literally, against Georgia, in one half, went 16 of 24 for 208 yards and a touchdown, and he had an interception that literally hit his wide receiver in the face mask, and the guy's not even here anymore. Or meaning,
is that like a crazy stat line though? Like, I mean, that's a good stat line.
He threw for 208 yards and a half versus Georgia. It's interesting. You bring
that's in a half, just like the amount of.
Hold on, you can't say that I'm derailing you.
All right.
Well, Anthony Richardson threw for 271 yards against Georgia and wasn't 50% completion percentage against them. My point is, when you have a guy that literally comes into the SEC and wins the West with a roster that, let's call it what it is. Everybody talks about, Florida's roster was depleted. What in the Sam hell do you think LSU's was with 60-something scholarship players? They had 2 true freshman offensive tackles. They had 2 new offensive guards and a brand new center. Their running back room was abysmal. Kayshon Boutte, let's call it what he is, was dookie. He's not even going to be a first-round pick, which everybody projected him to be. He had things falling around him at LSU and elevated them to the SEC win champs. Now, my biggest point in all this with Jayden Daniels, everybody poo-poos on him on. Why, I don't know. He outplayed Bryce Young. He made Bryce Young look, when they went head-to-head, very subpar. Bryce Young went 25 of 51, where Jayden Daniels led his team to a victory in overtime, and the 2 passing touchdowns that he had put LSU above Alabama and the biggest metric on the scoreboard. So you can tell me all you want about him being a bad draft prospect, but when
I never said he's a bad draft prospect, though. That's where we're getting
work himself into the first round. You're taking a shot at the young man.
That's not a shot. I'm saying that he's good enough to get drafted on day 2. Do you know how hard it is to get drafted on day 2 as a quarterback?
If you're going to legitimately sit here and tell me that you're going to put the slobber all over Anthony Richardson, but not see the trace that Jayden Daniels has, shame on you.
But that's where the misconception is. I'm not saying that he's not good enough. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. It is hard to be drafted as a 2nd or 3rd round pick as a quarterback. He has the athleticism in my eyes to get drafted that early. But again, I don't see a guy who has the decision making with all the amount of games that he has played. Where I think that
what is 70% completion percentage?
Blake, how many games has the guy played? Where for some reason you sit here.
He's a career 68% completion percentage guy.
You keep wanting to bring up the comparison of him and Anthony Richardson. In Jayden Daniels' first 12 games as a starter, was a 60% completion percentage player. Anthony Richardson in his first 12 games, I get it, he was 54%. But let's also take into account you try to bring up this argument that LSU this past year had a bad roster.
They wasn't that good. Depleted. I didn't say bad roster. I said
you're trying to act like he's playing with the UNC Charlotte roster. Meanwhile, Jayden Daniels, his top receiver was Malik Neighbors, who had 1,000 yards receiving.
3-star recruit, Joe.
Anthony Richardson's top receiver had 661 yards,
and was the next 5-star wide receiver. So you talk.
You said on the show the star ratings don't matter.
I know it doesn't. But that's your ultimate argument.
That's not my argument. My argument is that that Anthony Richardson did not have had no support.
That's
he had a
not
better offensive line, sure, but he had no support. He had to do everything.
So what you just said was, okay, so the biggest metric for a quarterback, the offensive line, was better than LSU's, but just whatever.
I also know for a fact that you can agree with me that LSU and Brian Kelly and that offense that they ran was a very well schemed and coached offense all season long. And what was run by Florida stunk. And we sit here on the show lamenting about how Billy Napier has been a hugely unsuccessful coach early on in his time at Florida. He has already mismanaged that program to the point where we are questioning if he has control over it. So for him to be in a situation where he's on a roster that is a complete mess with a coach that can't control the roster, that is not developing him and not putting him in a position to succeed and demanding he does everything. Conversely, Jayden is playing on a team where he's got a better receiver that he can go to. He's also got Kayshon Boutte, who was a 5-star recruit, and I know that he had a bad year, is still a good secondary option to get the ball to.
4.67
in an offense that is successful and built to produce success for a guy exactly like Jayden Daniels. Situation and context matters. He was set up perfectly for success. That's because on top of that, the year before that, Jayden Daniels threw 10 picks and 10 touchdowns.
Okay, then how do you give Anthony Richardson throwing for 3 touchdowns and 9 interceptions the same season that Jayden did that with 10 and 10?
He wasn't a full-time starter. He was a spot player.
Jayden Daniels had 42 players at Arizona State that went in the portal that year. 42. It's the NCAA record.
After the season, though.
No, between August the 1st and January 1st, 42 guys at Arizona State hit the portal.
Okay. Roster turnover. He was on a bad team.
LSU had 60-something players. Florida did not. You're acting as if Florida did not have the athletes that what are you talking about? They also do have athletes.
But just because they have the athletes, you can agree with me. Let me ask you this question.
Who
do you think was the better coach last year? Who do you think set up their team for better success?
Question. But my point is, you can't say, oh, well, he had a better receiver in Malik Neighbors when he's the one throwing it to him. Right? Like, so the guy that turned a no-name prospect into the second best receiver in the SEC last year in Malik Neighbors, who's throwing him the ball? Now, the year before and the year before that, LSU receivers were Buki.
Because Jayden Daniels is throwing him the ball.
Yeah, but
Jayden Daniels who made Malik Neighbors better, but Anthony Richardson.
The argument here is from even some part of LSU fans, he's a bad thrower of the football. Where? Now, I will admit this, and I don't want this to be misconstrued.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to learn to – I agree with your biggest point. He's got to take a massive step forward with throwing the ball down the field. I am 1,000% with you behind that. But here's my philosophy. I would rather a guy, a.k.a. Lamar Jackson, at Louisville, go back and look at it. That was everybody's biggest gripe with him. I would rather a guy miss a guy downfield and get 8 yards with his legs, because there's going to be a part in the game. You're still getting positive yardage. Like, I just don't – like, for me, I just don't understand. When I watch this guy, okay, and he goes up against Alabama and he goes up against Georgia, he went up against some of the – he had probably a top 5 strength of schedule that he went with against, not Florida. He didn't play against Vanderbilt. Joe, like – in conference, Jayden Daniels didn't play against Vanderbilt, right? Like, he didn't have the scapegoat of playing Missouri and Vanderbilt. His outlet was playing a undefeated Ole Miss team and a team that won 9 games in Mississippi State. That was some of the worst teams that he played all season long, and he put a team on his back and won those football games, not only with his leg, but with his arms. I will tell you this, okay? And you're not going to like this. I think that there are a handful of NFL teams right now. I asked one last night when we got in this debate because he actually texted it to me. There are teams that say that they would take Jayden Daniels right now over Anthony Richardson because –
oh, my God.
Joe, they would. Do you want to get in a source off with me?
No. I'm saying that
Joe,
they think that, I question the
even
decision making.
Okay, well, their decision making, they have the most draft win percentage in the NFL. Joe, he's got 1,111 passing attempts. He literally, there's not one metric. Name one metric, okay, inside the game that Jayden Daniels is not better than Anthony Richardson in.
Because I don't make my evaluations and decision making for pro potential off of metrics. I just don't.
At some point, you Rudy Poos that cover the draft, you have to come to a realization the game is played on the field. It does not matter. Hey,
it's not played in the box score.
You know what's interesting? You know what's so interesting?
Yes.
Is PJ Walker the best arm talent in the NFL?
No.
Then why did he throw a 75-yard bomb in the air for a touchdown against the Atlanta Falcons in week 7, and nobody talks about him? Arm strength means nothing when you're inaccurate, and that is what Anthony Richardson is.
Anthony Richardson has a stronger arm and is a far better athlete than PJ Walker, so that's a weird comparison to make.
He is inaccurate. You know who he is? He's Brucey from The Longest Yard.
He's inexperienced. That's a horrendous. He's inexperienced. He started 12 games.
Inexperience does not excuse the lack of accuracy.
It does. He was on an offense that didn't set him up for any success. The guy was fighting for his life on a week-to-week basis. We can watch it.
Offensive line win rate. Fighting for what?
I'm not saying that he was getting pressured constantly. My whole point is that he was. I said this earlier, you can agree with me that LSU's offense is a much better offense schematically than Florida's.
No doubt, but
put Anthony Richardson in LSU's offense, I bet he does way better.
They don't win 8 games.
That's just not true. That's just not true.
You know why? Because when you play against Alabama and it's 4th and goal from the 2 and you are overtime, I don't know if Anthony Richardson can make that throw to win the game.
You're acting like he can't hit the broadside of a barn. His accuracy isn't that bad. He has bad throws because he has limited reps playing the position.
Joe,
in-game reps.
Are you literally joking right now? I pray to God that you're joking. Reps in a college game from an accuracy standpoint does not make the excuse that he should be a 50% completion percentage player. He's 53% accuracy. And we see true freshmen. You want to talk about reps? True freshmen that come in. You know, there's a guy with long hair that looks like Sunshine named Trevor Lawrence. How did he do with his accuracy? And he didn't have the reps. What about Justin Fields? What about all these quarterbacks that come in and have better accuracy numbers than he does? You know what's interesting? There were 17 freshman quarterbacks that came in during COVID. How did those reps work? You know what they all had better than Anthony Richardson? Accuracy.
I would love to know who some of those other quarterbacks are, but I think you can agree with. I think you can agree with me.
6 of them. Bryce Young sat behind Mac Jones, didn't get the reps. The next year went out and won the Heisman. And before you say Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson are different, they're only going to be 3 picks apart from one another.
Because they're not drafted for different reasons.
Why? Both teams need quarterbacks.
Bryce is getting drafted because he is more ready to play, and Anthony Richardson is getting drafted because he has the highest ceiling.
In the wrong way, but if you're drafting a quarterback in the top 5 and the top 6 picks, he's going in there to change the franchise.
He is, but Anthony Richardson and Will Levis are not coming into play right away. They're not. Look, I want to take this back to one thing that's very important here, Blake. Would like to reiterate, I do not think that Jayden Daniels is a bad football player. I didn't say if I really didn't think he was a good football player as an evaluator, I would have said he's a UDFA. I would have said he's a late 3rd round pick. That's not the case. Again, at one point at Arizona State, when he had early success at Arizona State, many people said that he is a sleeper prospect amongst the quarterbacks. The things that he needed to clean up that I'm still waiting for him to clean up are, again, his decision-making after his initial read. Can he decide not to run after that initial read does not open up? How does he do? And I know that the Georgia game is a good example. All I'm asking for is some development before I'm willing to throw him in the first-round conversation. It is so difficult so difficult to be considered a first-round pick. And the reason why Anthony Richardson is brought up,
difficult to be considered a first-round pick when Anthony Richardson has, of his last 14 games, 12 of them are not 60% completion percentage or above.
Anthony Richardson is an outlier. The only reason why Anthony Richardson is in the first-round conversation is because he is a physically gifted athlete, and that he is that gifted that NFL teams are willing to forego those massive complications. I'm not going to sit here and say that Jayden Daniels was a worse college player last year than Anthony Richardson. I'd be a dumbass to sit here and say that, because that's just not true. But Anthony Richardson, from an athleticism standpoint, is so rare, is why NFL teams would be willing to forego that at the chance that he succeeds. That's why he goes as high as he does.
And running is rare. It would be great if this were the 1940s and quarterbacks still ran the triple option.
He also has one of the him and Will Levis have the strongest arms in
the NFL. Is a what league? Answer the fill in the blank. The NFL is a blank
passing league. It is a passing league.
Okay, it's a passing league, correct? He can't pass.
Josh Allen was drafted for the same reasons, the same exact reasons.
Different thing.
I understand that he played at Wyoming and his receivers stunk. I get that.
Do you know who holds the records from a receiver corps that has the most drops in one season? Go look it up if you want to.
That's not the point that I was getting at. My whole point is that you draft a traitsy quarterback that might not have winning success at the college level because they are a physical outlier from a talent perspective, an arm strength perspective, and athleticism perspective.
Name. All right. Let's go through this.
I can't name examples because it doesn't happen.
Hold on. Let's go down this and let's end it here. Okay.
And we'll get to the other stuff.
Let's do a little bit of a poll. Let's go Jayden and Anthony Richardson. Well, that's not working. All right. I'll give you the first one. Jayden and Richardson. Who has the better arm? Stronger arm.
Richardson.
Who's more accurate?
Jayden Daniels.
Okay, so we're 1-1. So arm strength and accuracy. I'm going to ask you a question. You better answer this right. Who has been better with their legs through their career?
That's a very leading question.
Okay.
Who is the better athlete should be the question. It's not who's been better with their legs.
No,
we're evaluating traits.
I'll give you the athlete for Richardson. So that's 2 for him.
We're evaluating traits here.
Who's been the better runner in college?
Statistically, Jayden Daniels has.
Okay, 2 and 2.
But
who has more wins?
Jayden Daniels does.
Who has more experience?
Jayden Daniels does.
Who has more touchdowns? Who has more touchdowns in one season than
picking college stats? This is a very leading poll. This is not you're setting it up.
Name some of the stuff that Anthony Richardson does better than Jayden Daniels. Go. Outside of him having a strong arm and being a better
athlete. Did you even include the athleticism one that I brought up?
Yeah. Okay.
He deserves an extra 2 for better athleticism. He deserves an extra 2 for arm strength.
Who leads an offense better? There's a good one.
Who's the better? Who plays in the better offense? The better coached offense.
But even at Arizona State, who had more control over their offense in his career, not just LSU?
He still played in a better coached offense at Arizona State than he did.
No, he did not. No, you mean now that is the worst take that you've had on this show.
No, come on. Schematically, he was set up in a better position.
They didn't even have a quarterback coach. Dude, look at what their entire staff got fired.
I'm talking about the first 2 years when everyone was high on Jayden Daniels.
Yeah, and the coaching staff that he had then is not there now
because of a scandal.
Correct. And he still had Jayden Daniels has never played in an offense. Here's another.
We're never going to agree on this.
No, because you're poo-pooing on a kid that has more evidence.
It's not poo-pooing. I'm not poo-pooing on him. A second-round pick is to say somebody's a second or a third-round pick is an immense compliment. It is a huge compliment.
I just don't understand your logic. I just don't get it.
I'm evaluating. You agreed with me on some of the things that we talked about here is that he is too willing to rely on his legs when I would love to see him actually sit and read what's in front of him.
Joe, let me ask you this question.
Mm-hmm.
Take Jayden Daniels out of it. I'm going to give you a team that is not affiliated with LSU. You ready?
Okay.
What would you say about a team that threw for 297 yards per game and 150 rushing yards per game? Okay. Offense, what would you say about that offense versus a team that ran or threw for 271 yards through the air, or 275 yards per game through the air and 185 yards on the ground per game? Which one's run more efficient?
The second one, based on the stats that you just
That's LSU. The first one's Georgia. And
okay.
I can make the argument that Georgia was a better run offense than LSU was. I'm not going to say that, but my point
the only reason why that argument could have.
My point is if we're going to put quarterbacks in other positions, what if you did put Jayden Daniels in Georgia? What if you did put Anthony Richardson in Georgia? I think people don't understand the magnitude of what that kid did last year in Jayden Daniels. I don't think that they get it, because Joe, I remember being at the game against Ole Miss and them having 60 scholarship players available. Okay, Kayshawn Boutte was hurt. He didn't want to play. Malik Neighbors had the dropsies. By the way, LSU led the SEC in drops, which we hadn't talked about. Okay, I think that he just gets so looked over because of his leanness, which, by the way, it looked like he's put on weight. Yeah. And then you like I just don't I don't fathom it. Like I can't like when someone says Anthony Richardson should be a top 6 pick versus Jayden Daniels, it's really difficult for me when the only two things he has is a bigger arm and more athleticism, but he doesn't run an offense better. He's not a team leader. And I talk to people in Florida. Joe, you might want to start asking some questions about how his teammates felt about him, because they didn't really like him too much.
But the thing you told me that, and we actually had that conversation, I heard the complete opposite from people who have talked about his interviews with NFL teams. Usually that stuff translates to the interviews with NFL teams.
Interviews with teams does not tell you what his teammates thought about him.
But more often than not, if a guy is a bad person, NFL teams are usually pretty quick to snuff that out.
And look, I say that I don't think Anthony Richardson's a bad kid. I think Florida's just a complete dumpster fire. Okay.
So wait. But that's my main point. One of the main points that I brought up. Do you agree?
Dumpster fires with first-year head coaches.
Do you agree that situation matters at the pro and college level for a quarterback for them to succeed? Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
So why are we automatically see? I
think that Jayden Daniels got LSU more out of the fire than what Anthony Richardson had to get Florida out of the fire.
But he was with a much better coach and with a much better proven track record.
And played in a weaker division.
He might have played in a weaker division, but again, he was in an offense that set him up perfectly.
So they led the country in rush yards per game, and outside of the service academies.
LSU did.
No,
Florida did. I'm talking about from a snap to snap basis
right in the running game.
But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying from a snap to snap basis, schematically, LSU is a much more efficient and better offense that uses their athletes better than Florida's did. We're not going to agree on this.
All right, let's move forward. You remember you talked about you wanting to come to Louisiana? It's been revoked.
Oh, come on. What's like the most adjacent state that I could come to? Or like what are the Alabama?
No, Alabama and Louisiana don't even touch one another.
Oh,
Jason, there's nothing like Louisiana just because of the culture. There really isn't.
No, but I'm saying I'm going to travel to all the states around Louisiana for
don't care. Please, God, go to Texas. Please, God.
I'm absolutely
specifically go to Austin. All right. Since we had a good debate and Joe said we don't need to, go that long on this debate. Well,
and we went for 40 minutes.
Oh no, we started the show at 20, so we went 30 minutes. All right, let's talk about this Big 12 Pac-12 merger, Joe. Let me tell you what I'm hearing. I'm going to get your thoughts on this. Ready? ESPN's leading the Pac-12 and the Big 12 to merge. Okay. They want to have the Pac-12 rights and want to obviously have the Big 12 rights. Big 12 is going to get a new deal, and I think the Pac-12 is going to get a new TV deal. ESPN wants it. They don't want just the Pac-12 right now the way that it is. Okay. What I heard is that ESPN execs met with both commissioners and they would be co-commissioners of this conference because it would be a 20-team conference. Okay. I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all. Logistically, I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense for just a lot of different reasons. Okay. The only problem I have with that, it's the same thing that I had with the ACC and the Pac-12. Now you have some Florida teams in here. You have a team in West Virginia. Logistically, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay. What do you think about the potential Big 12 and Pac-12 merger?
I think logistically it makes more sense than the ACC one, but had they not added Central Florida and Cincinnati, I think regionally you could have made that one work because it's really not that difficult to travel. Like, for example, trying to fly from Los Angeles to Texas, it's a very easy flight. It's a very quick flight, but to have to go from coast to coast, it does get very complicated. But for a survival standpoint, I do believe that this is what both of these conferences need. Instead of them eating one another and trying to steal teams from one another, them connecting and trying to use their powers to compete against the other conferences is going to create more success. And I understand why ESPN does not want either conference on their own, because if the Pac-12 loses one or two more of their premier teams, they're below the American. And right now, the Big 12 looks kind of like the American. It's a slightly better version of the American. That's not a very sexy product to sell. Those aren't games that you're going to want to sit down and be like, wow, TCU's playing Kansas this week. I'm excited to watch that game. It's just not the same level of competition. So I think by adding more teams, you can create better rivalries and you can just have more games to turn to. More quality teams that can face off with one another. I want to see the top teams like Washington play against TCU. I want to see the top teams like Texas Tech play against Oregon. I want those types of matchups. But right now, I think that there's just a huge separation between the top and the bottom of both these conferences.
Okay. I'm glad that you ended it like that. I'm going to push back on you. I don't think that there is. Outside of Oregon, okay, I don't think that there's a massive, like an outright massive gap, if you will. Okay. I don't think Utah's a really good football team when it goes to them playing other opponents. I don't think Colorado's ready. When I have Tulane beating USC, okay, with Jordan Addison still there, Caleb Williams is still there. Like I don't think that there's a big gap between the Big 12 and the Pac-12. You know what? Another thing. Now I'm going to stick up for TCU for just a second, okay, and Texas and Oklahoma. Joe, I still believe with my heart. Like as an example, Texas and Washington went down to the wire. Okay, Bijan didn't play. I mean, I just don't think that there's a massive gap between any of those teams. And when I watch Tulane beat the dog snot out of Alex Grinch's defense at USC, what am I supposed to take here? Okay. And so I actually don't mind some of these group of 5 opponents coming into the Big 12. Like I really don't. I think UCF has shown that they can be a consistent player sometimes. I think the recruiting will get better. So I just don't think with the Big 12 and the Pac-12 that it's as massive. I think it's the 2 weakest conference emerging because I still think that Florida State's getting better. I think that NC State at any given year can be a good team. I think Wake Forest is better than anything that the Big 12 has consistently right now, right? I mean, I don't think you can make that argument. Those 2 conferences are the 4th and 5th best Power 5 conferences, even though TCU just got to a national title. That's where I sit. And I think you merging them makes a lot of sense to me.
Right. The last point that I threw in there on my thoughts on this to further elaborate on that. What I was getting at is that the bottom teams in the Pac-12 aren't sniffing the top. They can't beat any of the top teams. This isn't like the SEC where you hypothetically could have a massive upset with a team like Mississippi State that's in the middle, or a team like Mizzou.
Do you think that's why the Pac-12 on the West Coast doesn't have the ratings and viewership and excitement?
I think one, it's on late, and I think a lot of East Coasters don't really watch it, which those who are out late and are up late, I remember when I was in college, I always enjoyed the fact that when I was pre-gaming and going out to the bars or at the bar, when I didn't want to talk to people, I could just stand there and look at the TV. Like I always love that. It's one of the things I hate about Los Angeles is that there's nothing to watch after 10 o'clock. Everything's done by 10:30. But what we always end up with, the games that are being played are Wazoo, Colorado, which last year stunk. So like what I was getting at here is that both of these conferences, the Pac-12, Stanford, Cal, Colorado last year, they all stunk. They couldn't even sniff competing with USC. And I also look at the Big 12, and I think that West Virginia was a terrible team that couldn't have competed with any of the top teams. Iowa State stunk, even though they gave some pressure to Texas a little bit. They still weren't going to be able to beat anyone. Kansas was inconsistent all year. What I was getting at is that by merging powers, the teams that are consistently at the top that put the most money in, you can now create better matchups on a week-to-week basis. That's what you're selling. That's what these TV rights deals want, is at least one premier game a week. There were a lot of weeks for both of these conferences. There was no premier game. No one wanted to watch that.
Yeah, shit. I mean, because like Cincinnati versus UCF is an interesting game.
Yeah, it now is. It's kind of turned into a little bit of a rivalry the way that they competed in the American.
Mm-hmm. So now you go and get them. I mean, because one of those teams could easily go undefeated and win the Big 12, and they can get into a playoff spot, right? And so, I agree with that. Let's see what this TV deal does, because the Big 10 says that they're not going to add Oregon and anybody else. So I think to save college, this is what I do like. I do like that they're still trying to have a Big Four, right? Like they're not trying to completely just make it two conferences. I don't think that you should have two conferences.
Too much regionality. It wouldn't make
sense. Not only is it too much regionality, okay, you get to a point, you get to a place where that you don't have to make this all like the NFL, okay? Like, look, there are literally 100 times more teams, okay, in collegiate athletics than there is, okay, in the NFL. And when you're running a conference, as an example, now this has been mainly every conference's issue so far. Well, look, you're trying to make this TV deal because of football, and we get it. But you're literally crapping on every other sport that we have. And when you do stuff like that, it hurts us with Title IX. It hurts us with so many other things. And believe it or not, this is what I heard from a buddy of mine at ESPN. It's not the football numbers and the football stuff that's hurting that doesn't get these deals done. It's every other sport that they got to comply with, Title IX, all this kind of stuff that holds up the main cart in all of this because of just a simple and easy nature that you got to comply with everything that the NCAA says and does and makes you want to do, right? So it's crazy to think about that football is the reason that you're doing it, but every other sport's the thing that's holding it back.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, if you bring up the other sports, what's the second most important sport in college athletics? It's basketball. And I look at Big 12 basketball and Pac-12 basketball. They're possibly the two best conferences in college basketball.
Even though the Big 12 got absolutely railroaded this week.
Yeah, they did. But I look at the teams that they have in the tournament. Kansas, they've got Texas, which is really good this year.
They're gonna apparently, per one of our co-hosts at Believe, she says UCLA's taking them down today.
Dude, that made me so happy that whole thing that happened yesterday.
To your point, that's a Pac-12 opponent. Well, will be a Big 10 opponent, but you get what I mean. Like, it's still a Pac-12 opponent versus a Big 12 opponent.
Yeah, and Pac-12 basketball kind of
teams aren't going to be in the conferences in 2024. That's
actually, now that I think about it, the Pac-12 doesn't maybe have as good a quality of basketball because they're losing UCLA and USC, which were two of the better programs. Then Arizona goes and loses, which if that's what you're hanging your hat on.
Oh my God. I know, and so many people had them winning their bracket. Let me ask you.
Oh, I did too. My bracket's toast.
I didn't ask you this question in the pre-show because I wanted to get your instant reaction.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you a very serious question, and you might want to clip this.
I'm worried.
Is the West Coast, when it comes to college athletics, dead?
No, it's not dead.
Okay, let me ask you this question: what are they winning worth a damn? And I mean that. Like I am not trying to. I really want to know, because it gets to a point for me, Joe, that I look at the West Coast and I'm like, wait, your viewership is extremely low. The American is drawing more numbers than you. That's why the Big 12 goes and gets Cincinnati and UCF. What are we talking about here?
Well, here's the problem. The two schools in the biggest hotbed region for quality of recruits have been historically down until this past season in USC and UCLA. It wasn't until this past year that they were good. I believe viewership and attention on the West is so heavily reliant on how well those two teams do. It's not like the Midwest where if Michigan's down, Ohio State gets attention or Notre Dame also gets attention and vice versa. When either of those teams, and especially very specifically USC, because UCLA can't carry the water on their own. If USC stinks, no one cares. No one cares.
And
because I look at all the top quarterback recruits.
And that for me just it kind of confirms it for me a little bit, right? Because
but once they're good again and they're improving, I think that the attention is going to come back. There just isn't pride in it right now as there has been in the past. There was noticeably an annoyingly increased amount of pride this year, which I hate because I hate USC. But I think it's growing. I think it's coming back. Look at all the recruits that come out of Southern California. Bryce and CJ
and Jayden, they're all in that picture.
Just Jayden from California?
Yes, San Bernardino, I believe.
They're all from the area. So
yeah, Bryce and Jayden played against each other in Pee Wee football.
I think
how close they were.
If you can keep the Mateo Uyunglele's and all these quarterbacks in the area, the attention is going to come back. I believe
We'll see. All right. I want to tell our good friends before we get it to Nick Saban. You want to tell our friends about BetOnline?
Yeah. If your bracket is busted like mine, make sure you head on over to betonline.ag. Make these games a little bit more enjoyable so you're not sitting there and pissed off listening to your buddy who claims that his bracket is still going to win the March Madness pool. So going over to betonline.ag, it's got all the updated odds and all the games. It's going to be a quick turnaround for all these odds, and you're going to want to go somewhere to get some quick. That is BetOnline, betonline.ag. Use promo code BELIEVE50. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, let's transition because we're close to ending the show here. So Joe broke some news this week. Tony Mitchell, safety, top 100 prospect, an early enrollee at the University of Alabama, was arrested in Florida this week, I think March the 15th, on drug charges, and then his passenger or the other person in the car was arrested on drug charges with intent to distribute or attempt to deliver, which means you're just trying to sell drugs. There also was a gun charge. There was a scale in the car. Joe, it's interesting. We had this conversation on our last show as Kirby started to lose control, and you said you thought it was really concerning that Georgia had that many people arrested. Now, I'm gonna shift a little bit on this and tell you something. I don't worry about Kirby or if Kirby has lost control at Georgia, because on the field it hasn't necessarily translated, right?
Mm-hmm.
When it translates when something happens off the field and translates on the field, meaning if you're undisciplined off the field but disciplined on the field, has your coach really lost control? Here's my only thing about Saban in Alabama right now, and this has been my biggest thing over the last 2 seasons. Last year, and we've talked about this, they were so undisciplined on the offense and defensive side of the ball. It was historic for Nick Saban. My ultimate question would be, is everybody is asking if Kirby Smart's lost control at Georgia. My real question is Nick Saban losing control at Alabama?
Those who tuned into the last episode that we did when we talked about the Kirby stuff, my stance on just in general with guys getting arrested and off the field issues, academic issues, any of that stuff, I hold coaches accountable for that. I really, really do believe that it is on a coach to develop the maturity of guys. And I don't even look at it in the sense of they shouldn't recruit guys that they know have character issues. I don't think that at all. But I do think that it is a coach's role. Every personality that you bring in the locker room, you're supposed to help them develop as young men. I will say I do hold Nick accountable for this. I think that this is very concerning that this happened. But to be fair, and this isn't my whole argument, Mitchell, how long was he even there for? You know, he was only in
January, so January, February, March.
It's not like Saban has been able to really instill anything on him. He hasn't really been around the program. I can't hold him too accountable, but at the same time, it's a pretty big black eye. And this is, I would argue, an intent to distribute. We don't know the full context. Everything is alleged. We don't know the. Well, sorry. Well, he's innocent until proven guilty.
Okay, well,
but I understand the evidence is bad. The evidence is really bad. I'm going to sit here and say that the evidence is very, very bad with the amount of weed. We all saw the picture. The amount of weed and the drugs that were in the car is not good. I'm hoping that Mitchell turns it around. This is a dumb enough of a mistake for him to figure it out. Do you know more about the law, legal process than I do? Is he going to go to jail for something like this?
He could.
If he's not pinned for the weapons charge,
the gun means nothing to me. The gun, I mean, look.
More on the weed?
It's more on the intent to distribute, right? Meaning, number one, what are you doing with all that weed? And then number two, who are you going to give it to? Now, he's not going to rat on who he's going to give it to and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's a massive deal. Okay. I'm going to go a little bit further than you, okay? Because I think it does show a pattern of Saban in a sense. Joe, they're highly undisciplined on the field, and they're highly undisciplined off the field, okay? I think that's a direct correlation, okay? When guys are having issues off the field and it translates on the field, I have massive red flags, okay? And you're right. It's not Nick Saban's fault that, he hadn't had him that long. But I do disagree that I don't think it's Nick Saban's fault for a guy. So Nick, in an example, how can he control a guy on spring break going with another human being and they're trying to sell weed? Like, I'm sure he had no idea that was going on. But here's an argument I want to take it to some people, okay? Now NIL looks a lot better when you can get a kid off the street, give him NIL money where he doesn't have to sell dope, right?
Yes.
And historically, okay, people that play college football come from a scenario and situation, white, black, purple, green, orange, yellow, blue. Doesn't matter your skin color. Historically, I mean, Joe, my mom, okay, she's watching my kids right now. Single parent household. I did not grow up rich. I worked my butt off to get where we were at, where me and my wife are at now. My mom worked her ever-living ass off. Still came from a single-parent household.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's where a majority of young men come from. These at least 50%, right?
Yeah.
At least 50% come from a split-parent household. I hate that he did this, okay? But I do have some red flags flying around Alabama and Saban. And like we talked about, like this whole Tommy Rees thing too. Okay. You mean to tell me that if every college coach that coaches offense, Tommy Rees is your dude? What is the industry telling me when Tommy Rees is your number one guy? Right? Like, I wonder if he's really losing control here. That's what I think. I do ask myself the question a lot. Is Nick truly losing control? And I say that while he's got the number one overall recruiting class, and they might go back out there and win another natty. I still think Nick's going to win a natty before he retires.
Yeah, I mean, this recruiting class is going to set him up for this. The other thing too, and I know that we could really go down this road, but living in a state now where weed is legal, and then also
meaning where you live right now in California, right?
But in New Jersey and also in New York, it's now legal, and also in Rhode Island, it was decriminalized. Where if you have a large portion, it's different. But if you have a small amount on you, it's decriminalized. Where I think it's just a fine or something along those lines. I don't know the exact of it. I also point to the fact that, like, just why isn't it nationally legal yet? Like, these arrests are so, like, kids aren't going to go and sell the shit if it's easy to buy, Like,
no, Joe, I mean, with all due respect, I mean, like, there are a lot of southern states that have decriminalized weed. It still doesn't stop the fact that he had.
But I think that if you can get it from a dispensary,
I'm going to throw this out there.
Yeah.
I don't know how much weed that was in that duffel. And that
it was ridiculous. It was a ridiculous amount.
Joey, I would make the assumption it's about a pound's worth of weed, if not more. Okay.
Buy at a dispensary these days.
I just don't. I don't know, man. I mean, that's difficult, like, because then you get into between a fine line. It's more about the intent of what you're doing to some extent versus the actual drug that you have that worries me. Meaning,
right, if weed was legal, that might end up, because they're trying to make money, it might end up being cocaine. But we don't know that.
And it wasn't. So I don't want to get the facts under,
Yes.
I just have an issue. Not an issue. I really have red flags around Saban right now. Now I say that, and next year watch him beat the dog manure out of everybody. Okay.
And LSU.
Hey, I'm not going to sit here and say, look, they historically have beat the dog crap out of everybody. It would be naive for me to come in here and say LSU doesn't have, or Georgia doesn't have, or Tennessee doesn't have an outright dogfight on their hands when anybody plays Alabama. Joe, they are, as much as we say that Kirby has taken the pinnacle, okay, of college football. You ask any coach in the country who they're more scared of when it comes to, like, man, Nick might be older, but he's getting more pissed off, which makes him worse at times when it comes to winning and losing. Joe, historically, he doesn't. I mean, his worst seasons are 2 losses.
Yes, which is ridiculous.
It's insane. It's unreal. It's unreal that we said Saban's down with 2 losses. And look, I can't. Why am I coming out here trying to defend him? It's not a defense when it's reality, right? Like, reality comes into, look, they're the best. They're one of, if not the best team in the country every year. Joe, the worst thing that happens to them is they're a top 10 team.
Yeah,
sign me up for that. You know who would take that? Outside of Georgia, everybody in the country would take Nick Saban.
Yes, yes.
I know a team.
Absolutely.
I know a team that fired their head coach a couple seasons ago and offered Nick Saban $18 million a year.
Wait, who?
Can't tell you that. I'd burn a source. They offered him $18 million a year and he turned it down.
You got to tell me that off air. That's bonkers. That's $18 million a year. Oh my God.
$18 million a year. 15 to 18. The last year of his contract will be $18 million. Joe, that's not crazy. Brian Kelly's making 10. Kirby's making 11 or 12. Nick's making 13. Okay. And by the end of a 4-year tenure, okay, the way that these coaches are getting paid now, 18 million is not that far-fetched of how much it's grown. And like, look, Orgeron got paid Nick was making $8 million 4 years ago, right? Like, he wasn't making $10 million a year. He's about, it's how the market's dictating things, Right. So anyway, all right. Anything else? Oh, mailbag. We got mailbag.
All right, we still want to get to the mailbag?
Yeah, let's do mailbag.
Let's do a couple questions.
15 minutes. We can go an hour and a half. You want to do some mailbag?
Let's get a couple questions.
We need a what do you call that? A mailbag, like, intro.
Sounder.
Yeah.
Sounder. I can make one. Back in my day, I used to make a lot of audio imaging. That's what they call it. Okay. Wait, let me. I had the questions pulled up and I closed it right as you were about to close the show. Okay. All right. We already addressed the Joe flying out for an LSU game. Okay. First question from Colin. In the expanded playoff, the group of 5 will be a part of the field. Will that help to close the talent gap between the Power 5 and the group of 5 conferences? I say no. I don't think so. I think it creates more opportunities. Well, because, like, look at what happened with Cincinnati. They made it, and then they jumped conferences. I think if somebody does well enough and they have consistent enough success, they're just going to jump to a bigger conference.
I agree with you. I mean, the only thing, you're right, that and you in my question when you say that teams like Cincinnati and UCF go to the Big 12. But, we were talking about Tulane earlier, best recruiting class they've had under their regime, and they go out there and beat USC. You know what I mean?
Honestly, like, ACC should go after them. Like that, there's no reason they shouldn't. Really?
Yeah, I think the Louisiana powers that be wouldn't let them do that because they only want one Power 5 team in the state.
That sucks, but they would be perfect for all the private schools that are in the ACC. They would fit perfectly.
I agree.
Next question from Colin. If the Big 12 and Pac-12 were to merge, what would the conference name be?
Big Pac?
That sounds. I think it would be Pac-20.
Why would you name it Pac-20 when
you're dissolving?
Yeah, you're a dissolving conference, and the only reason that you're doing that is because the Big 12 is saving you.
I just think Big 20 sounds goofy, and then you also run into the Big 10. You just sound like you're replicating the Big 10. You know, that's
well, they're kind of replicating the Big 10 now with Big 12.
Yeah, but I feel like though the Pac-12 would make that argument. It's like I think it would come up with like a new name because the regionality of it doesn't make any sense. Because like, what does PAC stand for? Pacific. I don't even know.
I don't know. I mean, what does BIG stand for? Notorious.
Someone commented Tupac and Biggie would be the name of the.
All right, you want to answer that one? Who are you, more of a Tupac? I mean, you're.
Well, that wasn't what the question was. Somebody said that the name of the conference would be Tupac and Biggie would be the name of the conference.
I am in the minority probably on this one. I love Biggie, but just because he's fat. Tupac might have the better songs, but I love Biggie because he's fat and I'm fat.
I can get behind that. Also, East Coast thing.
Yeah, East Coast.
I gotta ride with the East Coast guy.
But then you get into the scenario of the West Coast, straight out of Compton, mother named Ice Cube.
Now Beast Coast, baby, we gotta ride Beast Coast. You're not really East Coast.
Beast Coast. Let me ask you this: who's got the better food, East Coast or West Coast?
East Coast, because the Italian food is Mexican food here is very good. Outside of California, I don't know if who talks about the food in Washington State.
Let me ask you this question. Joe. Is New York's pizza really that good? Like
yes. It's not even close. Have you had New York pizza before?
Not really.
Have you been to New York?
Once, but I mean, I want to go to a Yankees game. I'm a big Yankees stan.
Yeah, I've noticed that you do tweet a lot about the Yankees. Why are you a Yankees fan?
I mean, we don't have. I mean, first off, I'm Italian. Secondly, I mean, it's just, we don't have I mean, I didn't want to be a Braves fan because everybody was a Braves fan growing up, and then everybody was a Astros fan, and I thought that they stunk ass. So I mean, even when they had like Moises Alou, that's a name, it's a blast from the past. Jeff Bagwell, I just want to be a Yankees fan. Before I die, I am going to a Yankees game.
I'm sure you'll make the trip sooner than that, but we'll see.
So,
Brian Maffey asks, what schools will lead the AAC now?
AAC, that's the American Conference?
Yeah, with Cincy and UCF moving to the Big 12. I think a lot of it's going to be Tulane. I really do think that Tulane's going to run that.
Maybe. I agree with you there.
Willie Fritz stan.
Well, let me tell you something. I used to hate Willie Fritz because he was at Sam Houston State. Yeah. He's just too good of an offensive mind, and he's too good of a coach. Like, I mean, shout out to my guy Willie. He did like our tweet, by the way. He's just a great recruiter. He's a great coach. I mean, like the Tajay Spears. Let me tell you. So let me tell you how that went on. So Tajay Spears, the running back at Tulane, Willie got a text message. I know who sent him the text message and said, "Hey, bro, you need to take this kid Tajay Spears from Ponchatoula, Louisiana." And he was there the next morning at 7:00. He wanted to see what time he got to school. He wanted to see how he was dressed. He wanted to see what he did on the football field. The kid got there at 7:15, 15 minutes before the bell rang. Pants were pulled up, shirt was tucked in, and he was there, and he was ready to roll. Willie Fritz offered him within 5 minutes of seeing him. Not even talking to him, seeing him. Okay?
Wow.
Willie's just a good dude. And I'm a Willie Fritz stan account.
Yeah, Tajay's a hardworking kid, so that's good to hear that.
And look, shout out to his mom and dad and everybody, and all them. Shout out to the Rucker family. Shout out to everybody.
RB4 for me in the 2023 NFL draft.
Who's your forward? Bijan, Gibbs. Who's your number?
You're gonna hate it. Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs is number 2. Deuce Vaughn is number 3, and then
no, I don't hate that. I don't hate that at all.
I love Deuce Vaughn, man.
I do
he
too.
Is such an outlier, but he is so damn hard to tackle. He is so small.
The only thing that worries me, man, he's 5'5". He came into the combine at 5'5".
He's not gonna beat if somebody drafts him and think that like he's going to be a 300 touch guy, he's not. If you draft him to play slot receiver,
I mean, he's Darren Sproles.
Yeah,
he's got to learn how to catch.
He's got pretty good hands though. Like
for as tiny as he is, he's going to get 80 target. He might get 75 targets in a season.
And return kicks. He is going to be such a problem. People were like, "Oh, I tweeted about him a while ago." People were like, "Oh, it's Donnell Pumphrey." Donnell Pumphrey was not that as good of an athlete.
I do like that kid from UAB. What's his name? McBride or something?
Yeah, Dwayne McBride.
Yeah, now that kid,
tough runner.
Yeah, that kid. Like I saw him in person. That kid runs hard, man, and he was getting blasted. And by the way, you know what? You know what I want to do at least for 15 minutes within the next month. I want to talk about Trent Dilfer at UAB. What do we think about Trent Dilfer at UAB?
That should be our next first year expectations. Let's do it. We also got to do Tom Herman.
I'm not.
Boo.
Yeah. I mean, Tom, can I just tell you something? Yeah. I am not a Tom Herman fan. Never have been.
Really?
Tom Herman, when he flipped off the camera when a kid picked another school besides Texas, I'm like, I'm out of this dude. I'm out with this dude.
He seems, you never won't say this with a coach. He seems immature.
He is He is really immature.
It's weird to say about a grown man.
I'm really interested and intrigued by UAB with Trent Dilfer. Yeah. Very intrigued.
You know who's a big Trent Dilfer fan?
If you say Josh Fisher,
no. It's Eric is. Eric did a documentary on him.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He produced a documentary on him coaching the high school team. Yeah, he really likes Trent Dilfer. He speaks very highly of him. Speaks very highly of him.
I'm texting Eric after the show. I want
Trent the skinny.
No, I want him on my show.
Let's see if we can get hopefully he can help. Or maybe he will. Next question, we got two more. Hunter Heisley. Who most likely, we know the answer to this question, who most likely will lead their team to a championship? Who's the more likely guy to lead their team to a championship in 2023? Sam Hartman or Jayden Daniels?
You answer first.
Sam Hartman, just because I think I'm just kidding. No, I'm just joking. Had Tommy not left, I could have made the argument for Jayden Daniels. There's too many question marks at offensive coordinator.
Y'all got to beat Marshall and Stanford before you can say that.
But we didn't have a quarterback. I mean, have a quarterback last year, and Sam Hartman's one of the best college quarterbacks in the country.
Your offensive coordinator also stinks.
I don't know. Jared Parker, I'm scared.
You made a worse offensive coordinator hire than Tommy Rees. Let's call it.
That's why I can't pick him. Jayden, though, I said this before, and I think that it's a perfect storm for, not because of Jayden, but I just think that roster in general is in a position to succeed, that they can win the West if everything goes right. I don't think they win a national championship next year, but I think that they can make the playoff. I think it's very possible.
We'll see. I think outside of quarterbacks, I agree with you. I think that LSU through the portal has got themselves a better roster. Specifically, Joe, from top to bottom, you're going to hate this. I think that they've gotten I think that they have a better offensive line than Notre Dame. I think that they have potentially 3 first-round picks.
We're gonna start arguing for 20 minutes. You can't say that when Joe Alt's the best offensive lineman in the country.
No, like I said, I agree with you. Alt is without question the best offensive lineman in the country. As a unit, as an outright unit, I don't believe that Notre Dame Joe, hold on.
I will defend Notre Dame's offensive line until the day that I die.
You can't, buddy. I've been trying to tell you this. And one day you're like, I believe next year. Can I tell you something? Hot take, and you're gonna love this. You're a Notre Dame fan. I think if there are specific teams, like, so for example, if Carolina or Houston struggles year one with their new quarterback, I think Alt can be the number 1 overall pick. I really believe that.
He is that good.
That good. He is, to me, as a former offensive lineman, he is by far the best offensive lineman in the country. I admit that. But as a unit, hold on, let me find this. Did I show you this? Did I show you this when my film study? LSU versus Bama.
I mean, it's a good singular play, but
It's
the
not
amount
a, but it's not a. Here's the thing, though, Joe.
the
It's
5 stars on Notre Dame's offensive line.
you
Blake
have
Fisher is a
you have
really
4
good
of them
player.
on LSU's offensive line, though. Is my point.
I think if we just look at if we matched up the left tackle and right tackle, and we did like a checklist between,
I think that LSU,
Blake Fisher and Joe Alt.
I'm not on Blake Fisher.
Really, you don't like? He's a great.
No,
athlete.
no. I can make the Joe again. You know that I digress to you on a lot of things, especially skill. Okay, I will listen to you and give you the floor on that one. When it comes to offensive lineman, Blake Fisher is a little tad overrated.
Yeah, because he gets boosted by his teammate. I think.
No doubt. And I will tell you, the interior of Notre Dame's offensive line got pushed around in too many games for me to say that they're a better unit.
Well, Jarrett Patterson's gone, and some of the other guys in that.
Well, then
group
if Patterson's gone, then who was worse than him?
Well, they had a bunch of young recruits that weren't ready to play yet. So I'm optimistic outlook. Last question I want to get to, though, Edwin Gomers. Based on next year's draft class and where the tight ends have been drafted historically, how high can Brock Bowers realistically go in next year's draft?
Top 20. I think top 20.
Yeah, wait. Here's the thing that with Brock, and it happened with Michael Mayer this year. I think that Brock is going to run a good 40, but I don't think he's going to test well in some of the other categories. And I think he's going to get overthought the same way that Michael Mayer was.
I disagree on one thing. I think that Brock Bowers is a better athlete than Mayer. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, but I think his numbers aren't going to be like, oh my God. And I think that everyone's going to create this unrealistic expectation like they did with Mayer. And then he's going to test, and then everyone's going to be like, "Oh, I don't know."
I don't know about that, Joe. I think he runs a low 4.5 at worst.
Some people said he runs a 4.3.
Well, so let me throw this out now. The guy that you went with back and forth with him, he's my buddy, Graham Coffey, okay, who covers Georgia for Sports Illustrated.
Yeah,
you know those tracking devices. Okay, like the
yes,
guys
the speed.
Did you know that Brock Bowers at 240 pounds during the season and during spring so far has hit 22.5 miles per hour running 17 times?
Dude can move. He can move.
Flat out move, bud. Like and you know what's even wilder than that? He's 240 pounds, right? Like I could see him. So then there was the thing from the Georgia people that him and Nolan Smith raced, and he beat Nolan Smith in a 40-yard dash.
I would believe that. Well, I will say one of the funniest things about Brock Bowers, seeing him in person at the media availability for the national championship, he looks like a GA. Like he looks like a graduate assistant. No, and I forget who.
40.
So someone wrote an article about this. Oh my God, I forget who it was. Maybe it was Thamel, because they did an interview with him, and it's like you go up to him and he's kind of losing his hair. He's just like this really unassuming. He's not like a jack big, like hulking mass like Michael Mayer was. He's just like this normal looking dude who would be like, I guess he plays tight end, but you watch him play, the dude's a freak. My main point is he feels like we do this a lot with tight end prospects. We just overthink them. And I think that he might slide a little bit. He's good enough to be a top 5 pick. Like he's Travis Kelce. He's Travis Kelce in the NFL.
I don't disagree with that.
All right. I think that's it for questions. We're getting attacked again for Georgia Tech takes on Twitter. So we got to go get to that.
Don't care. All right. We'll see you on Monday. Peace.
All right.